The Chronicles of Narnia are considered to be classics of children's literature, and they were very much part of my primary school years. There are 7 fantasy novels in the series. My favourite was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. They were written by a Belfast man, C.S. Lewis, who was baptised in this very church, St Mark's Donnel, by his grandfather, who was the rector. The author grew up just round the corner from here, and in later life he presented this beautiful window to the church. Artist and sculptor Ross Wilson is passionate about C.S. Lewis and all things associated with the land of Narnia.
C.S. Lewis wrote children's books because he wanted to put in place the books that he would have loved to have read when he was a child. In his book he opens doors for the imagination. In his book he takes us to meet this Redeemer Lion. In his book he shows that there is another way, that there is a way of faith, that there is a way of knowing God, and that way is all around us. And, you know, if we look for it, it's there to find. The Narnia storyline, you know, starts off in Lewis's childhood. I mean, the Northern Ireland landscape, the Donegal landscape, Castle Rock, Dunluce Castle, they all form part of Lewis's childhood imagination. These ideas and these concepts and these landscapes worked their way into his stories, worked their way into becoming the real Narnia, as it were. His children's books, you know, have influenced generations of young people and parents who've read those stories to those young people. And so Lewis is always about getting closer, further up and further in to the person of Christ. As an artist and as someone who works in the creative world, it's hard not to be influenced by what you believe. And for me, it's a responsibility to bring some of those things that I believe into my work. The C.S. Lewis sculpture came about through a letter that I read. It was a letter that Lewis had written to a young 10-year-old girl called Anne Jenkins. And she'd been reading The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and got to the point where Aslan had to give himself up as a sacrifice and couldn't understand why this great lion would lay down his life, and asked her mother, why is this happening? She said, look, I don't know, why don't you write to the person who wrote the book? So she wrote to Lewis. Lewis got hundreds of letters every month from kids, from people all over the world, but he would reply, and he wrote this reply. So it was him taking the time and the grace to point out these things in a very straightforward way, that if Narnia had existed and like our world had gone wrong and God wanted to save it, how would he save it? He would still save it by sending his son. How would he send his son to a land of talking beasts? He would send him as the king of the beasts. In the Bible, Christ is known as the Lion of Judah. That moment of grace that Lewis showed in 1961, 2 years before he died, had a big impact on that young girl's life. The whole Narnia concept hinges on that one letter. It's one of the most important letters that Lewis wrote. It was the inspirational point for the sculpture. Now, as a Sunday school teacher myself, I realise the responsibility of trying to encourage kids to look into things, to try and encourage them to use the Bible, to find out where certain books are, to help them question things and to answer their questions. And children have a brilliant way of seeing things. They're very direct. They don't have the mental baggage that we carry with us. They see things in a theological sense in a very straightforward way. In fact, they see things as Christ would like them to see it. With the mind of a child, and that's sometimes how we need to approach things. One conversation, and the right conversation, can change a child's life. And the idea of moving up further in and further up, closer to heaven.
To discover the importance our childhood plays in our lives as adults, we have already met a songwriter and a sculptor. Now let's meet a singing sensation. Daniel Donnel continues to enjoy an immensely successful career, having sold over 10 million records worldwide. But he doesn't take for granted the fame and fortune he enjoys today without thinking back to his childhood in a close-knit community in County Donegal.
Growing up here, you know, in this area, I suppose it being such a rural area, it meant that everybody knew everybody. There was no door closed to anyone. And as a child, that was a wonderful, I suppose, experience from my point of view, to be able to go from house to house. Everybody had a welcome. The children, whatever was here, we all just played together. We hadn't all the things that cities would have, like playgrounds, but we had endless freedom. I mean, this is just, I suppose, for me, heaven. The memories of coming to this speech as a child, and of course Owe Island, where my mother came from. I can see the house that we spent our holidays in, and the school that you can see there, minus the roof now, but we used to go to that school and dance. It's an amazing memory. I remember sitting on the steps on a lovely summer's evening. Community wasn't always big gatherings of people. It was small gatherings of people that created wonderful memories. And I suppose that sense of somebody to rely on was very important. I always feel very privileged to have grown up in a place like this. And I think it was the people that made it, apart from the beautiful scenery that we have. But I think it's the people that's the most important. As a child, when we went to the chapel, it seemed like you were there for every occasion. I mean, there was October devotions, and there was throwing out the petals in May Day, and, you know, confirmation, communions, first confessions. You went for everything. My first singing was done in the chapel. I was never on the altar. I was always in the choir. And I sang in the choir all the time. And even now, you know, whenever I'm at home, I would go in and sing in the choir. I suppose that's what gave me the love of that type of music. The fact of the chapel being such a focal point, everybody went. Then when I started singing, to meet people was like just an extension of all of that, you know. And still, to this day, it's the same. I think for me, growing up as a part of the Catholic community, that has stayed with me. I mean, I would still go to Mass every Sunday, no matter where I am in the world. It's something that is important to me. It's not something that I preach about, but for me it's the right thing to do. Even though the world moved on financially and people were better educated, the sense of community, I think, is still here. I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry, all who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord. have borne my people's pain, I have wept for love of them. They turn away. I will break their hearts of stone, give them hearts for love alone. Who will speak my word to them? Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold